Boom! There you are. Boom!
There's the evil to the wood.
Boom! This is witchcraft. Who's there? Boom! Sam? Samuel!
Thanks, everybody. This movie is so good. I heard about this movie when it premiered at Sundance last year, and I was so excited to see it. I missed it while I was at Sundance, and I just kept hearing about it. People who were there talked about it literally up until the release this year. 15 months later, people just couldn't stop talking about it, waiting for it. It's so creepy. It's so beautifully made, and it's not just a horror movie. It's a great movie. Robert, can you talk about trying to create something like that, working within a genre while at the same time expanding it as much as you can?
Yeah, I mean, basically, I had finally made a short film that wasn't terrible, and some people were kind of interested in developing a feature. And
How long did that take, if you don't mind me asking?
What do you mean?
A short film that wasn't terrible, for the filmmakers who are out there who might be upset with their last short film.
It was my second real short, that wasn't just kind of figuring stuff out. But in any case, So I wrote a bunch of weird scripts that I was really passionate about, but they were so genreless and strange that no one wanted to make them. So I realized that in the climate, it seemed if I wanted to get a film made and seen, I should stick with the genre. So how could I do something that was personal for me, that I wasn't going to be compromising my values? And so I went back to my past, and I'm from New England. New England's past has always been part of my consciousness. Witches were part of my earliest nightmares, so I thought I'd make an archetypal New England horror story. So by focusing on primary source materials instead of other horror films, this is what happened.
So when you start thinking about witches, did you immediately think about the Puritans and how witches affected them? Or did you start with witches and then find, well, maybe we should set this in a puritanical place?
Yeah, no. Being from New England, I had a very clear idea in my imagination about New England's mythic past and witches in terms of New England. And so it was always going to be together. And I was always interested in the idea of the very, very beginnings of New England. This is 60 years before the Salem witch trials, where New England had this brief period where we had kind of the Middle Ages almost in North America.
Absolutely, Ralph. How did you get involved, and what did you think when you saw this script, which I can only imagine sort of reads as incredibly authentic, the language?
It does. It came over really, really impressively. It's the first script I think I've ever had to put down and have a break from, just because it was so exciting. Yeah. It was. It read really, really intense as it appears on the screen. It did seem very, very authentic right from the start. The language, especially, was great. Yeah.
How hard was it for you to master the language of the Puritans?
It was, I have a Shakespeare background, so I wasn't intimidated, and I read 17th century stuff for my own enjoyment. but certainly writing in it was difficult. It's a really interesting period in the English language. In New England, New England was the most literate part of the Western world because it was illegal not to teach your children how to read because you had to read the Bible in English. This was super crucial. And less than 100 years earlier, people were being burned at the stake in England for translating the Bible into English. So you'll find wills from like a farmer who could read but couldn't write, and he has kind of an interesting, beautiful way of words. It was dictated, assuming the dictation is correct, because the Geneva Bible is it's a well-written book. I studied the vocabulary and the grammar structure, which mainly was flexible, which was kind of fun. And then reading period documents, I would basically take sentences and phrases and categorize them: things about farming, things you might say to your children, things you might say if your children were possessed. And then earlier drafts were these weird, monstrous collages of other people's words that I then honed into something that was, the different characters' voices. But some things were deliberately left intact, like things that the children say when they're possessed, or things that children allegedly said when they were possessed.
So you found like documentation of what they said children would say when they're possessed. There's an amazing possession scene in the film. I don't want to give anything away because it comes as a surprise. It's shocking. It's so creepy and well done. And what he's saying is out of this world. Is that something that you found in terms of like a document where they said this is what children would say?
Yeah.
That's wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like children might say this, children might say that. But it's like, oh, the Goodwin children of Boston in 16 whatever, said this. So
now, most movies when they talk about witches and that are influenced by the Salem witch trials or New England and witches, sort of focus on wrongly convicted women who were burned at the stake and were considered witches. You kind of take a much different approach when it comes to telling the story of the witch.
Well, look, the thing is, like, I couldn't understand, like, how the Holocaust, which Holocaust in Europe happened, how the Salem witch trials happened, but this was not a conspiracy where people were wrongly accused, yes, of course, but it wasn't just a matter generally of people saying, of like the clergy being corrupt and saying like, this woman is outspoken and I don't like women with power, so I'm going to call her a witch even though it doesn't exist, and then I'm going to hang her. No. Like in the early modern period, the real world and the fairy tale world were the same exact thing. Witches weren't something you believed in. Witches were something that existed. So when people, so it's like, people were so afraid of feminine power. It was such a fear that if you were an outspoken woman, they literally thought that you were a fairy tale witch, capable of doing all the kind of horrific things the witch does in this film. You could fly on a stick, so on and so forth. This was the reality. And that was key into understanding what this film would be. And so
much of the film is sort of predicated on this idea where you're not really sure if this is a thing that is actually doable, that women would be doing this, or if all of this has kind of been placed in this family's head by their own values. Even as the tension sort of ratchets up and things get even weirder and weirder, you could still, at the end of the day, say, well, this is kind of the father and the mother's fault, and they're putting all of this in these fearful children's heads. How did you go about playing that on the set? Because your character is kind of the most, if you even could be in this day and age, the most sort of non-believer of the family.
The most non-believer? I don't know. I mean, I think he's a very prideful man, and I think that's what motivates a lot of the story. I think that's what motivates the downfall of the family, his pride in bringing his family from England over to New England, and getting them excommunicated from the Puritan plantation that they live in, which happens at the start of the movie. He takes the family out of there, and he's a great believer in himself. I think is the prideful side of him. But
it's more like I didn't raise a witch up in this house.
Yeah, that's a line. Yeah, the fact that he can't believe that could happen to him, because he pridefully believes that he is the greatest Puritan, the most devout man in the world.
We're gonna make it.
Yeah,
He's just
absolutely.
consistently doing that to the
blind,
film. We're gonna
blind
make
faith.
it.
Yeah, well, he does. He constantly doubles up on his bets in a way. When bad things happen, he thinks, no, this can't possibly be happening. It can't be happening to me because I am devout, because I am this great Puritan. So he takes another risk and he puts another gamble, and they get deeper and deeper into the trouble that they're in.
Can you talk about the shoot itself? You're shooting in these woods. I think you shot in Virginia, right?
No.
Oh,
I wanted to shoot in New England, but for financial reasons, we ended up shooting in Canada.
Oh,
in Northern Ontario. And I thought, Canada, virgin wilderness, we're going to be all set. But really, where we had the funding, there was so much logging that we had to go way off the map to find a forest of a size, and also a forest system with white pines and hemlocks that would look like New England. So actually, we were much more remote than we ever would have had to have been if we were shooting in New England, which was kind of great. I mean, it was really hard on the crew. All the money's on screen. The infrastructure was really small. We had no cell service, no Wi-Fi. But for the cast, and for the atmosphere, it was helpful.
It was really helpful for us to be so far in the middle of nowhere. We were staying in a small town called Mattawa, in this tiny little hotel, a 7-bedroom hotel. We took over the whole thing, so we were living like a family, hundreds and thousands of miles away from home, and it helped us bond, and that sense of isolation was really there, and I think it comes over in the movie.
Absolutely. Sort of helps you maintain a certain amount, not that you're in character the whole time, but it helps you maintain an element of that character.
Absolutely. I don't think it's a film that we could have made going home at night, to families. I think you had to keep that element of darkness and a certain madness all the way through the shoot to put it up on screen like that.
Yeah. Now, the film, I think your direction is being compared to previous masters like Bergman or Kubrick. I think you've mentioned Murnau. And one thing that I noticed about the film, and this is going to be so technical and nerdy, so bear with me here, gentlemen, is a lot of the film, when we get to the woods, when we get to their home in the woods, becomes a fair amount of long takes, kind of quiet. But the opening scene of the film in the town is covered in the courtroom itself, or is that a church, or is that a courtroom?
It's same thing in Puritan society.
It's
meeting house.
It feels like it's covered from almost every angle very quickly in that opening scene, and then after that, everything kind of slows down. And I was wondering if you were trying to draw a sort of difference between what would have then been city life or sort of public life versus what it was going to be like in the woods after, and the way that you kind of created this difference in the style of filmmaking. Maybe I just might have been.
No, that's cool. I mean, that's cool. But I don't know. Like that meeting house scene was written very carefully. Like I had every shot. Like it was written like a shooting script, even the first draft of that. But it was more about trying to capture a kind of like tension and stillness, and we needed to see a lot of different people in that room. But I wanted it to be. I didn't want to just show a wide, and I don't know, whatever. I don't want to get into like my choices, but I would say that overall, like while there's not a lot of coverage in the film, and the blueprint that Jaron Blaschke, the DP, and I created to make this film was ultra specific. It was nearly cut in camera. Like it wasn't like coverage in a traditional way. Like we really knew what we wanted. But
was that for economical reasons or purely sort of stylistic reasons?
Both. I mean, we couldn't have done it any other way. I think if we had an extra 10 days, we probably would have got a few more shots. But there was no safety. It's not. But while we want to do something kind of like pure, it's not like if we could do every scene as a oneer, that would be the best thing to do, But it's just that as we moved on in the story, these longer shots seem to make more sense. But if you notice when we go to the scene where they're at dinner, it's shot very much like the courtroom scene, and because there again, like in the meeting house, the genders are split up on either side of the table. He's having this prayer. It's very like a family is a little church, a little commonwealth is a piece of Puritan rhetoric from the day.
Wow, that's unbelievable. Now, can you talk about as I said, I referenced a couple of master filmmakers from before. Were these people in your head while you were making the movie? These people that you've been or people have been comparing the style to, or is this just something that you're a filmmaker, maybe a cinephile, and they happen to just be in the back of your head no matter what you're making?
I mean, I bow down and praise Bergman and Dreyer all the time. The Shining, this film smells like The Shining, and I think it's kind of embarrassing, like how like the scent just is like wafting all over the place. But The Shining was a film that I watched a lot in my early mid-20s to understand how to create a film that's always tense at every moment. And so I think that, that was inevitably going to rub off on this. And whether I'm embarrassed or not, I think a lot of the film's success has to do with that homework.
Can we talk about the star that you have found in the film, Anya? She is amazing. Where did you come across this girl?
We had a good UK casting director, Carmel Cochran. She was awesome. Basically, Anya seemed like there was no way she could be a good Puritan. It just didn't seem possible for her. She spoke the language very well, with ease, with great facility, and there's something really enigmatic about her on screen. You stick the camera right in front of her face, you don't know what she's thinking, but you want to know.
Yeah. That's something that I noticed about her as well when I was watching the film, was, you see a lot of actors' faces a lot of times when you watch movies, but every now and then someone comes along that you're kind of just totally drawn to. She's incredibly charismatic when it comes to the camera. Was that something that you noticed in the audition, or you started picking up even further when you were shooting with her?
Yeah, I mean, she's incredibly charismatic. She has those incredible eyes that are so far apart that you're kind of just drawn into them. But as an actress, and without wanting to sound condescending, she's incredibly technical and incredibly proficient in that way as well. We were talking earlier on, there's a scene that we did in her audition, and I did the castings with Robert, and we did a scene where we have a confrontation, a father-daughter confrontation, and the way it appears on screen is almost exactly the same as it was in the casting that we did it the very first time. Her instincts are just bang on.
And this is also how I imagined the intonations when I wrote it, and which I was kind of with a lot of other. I mean, man, everyone who auditioned for this role was good, really. I'm telling you. But it was like things I was trying to coax out of other people. She just had.
Mm-hmm. You said that part of the film, or part of sort of being a witch, or getting sort of accused of being a witch in this time, was just the sort of Puritans' absolute fear of feminine power.
Yeah, I mean, semi-unconscious fear, because women didn't have power.
Yeah.
In the cultural worldview. I mean, that's what's really it's horrifying, to think that the evil witch, was men's fears, fantasies, ambivalences about women and female power, and in this period, it was also the evil witch was also women's own fears and fantasies about their power and ambivalences about motherhood. That's how she manifested herself. I think it was really tragic and just horrifying to read this primary source material and see women who thought that they were evil witches. Obviously there were women who were just forced into confessions, but I think that there are some women who we might say were mentally ill today, but would think, I don't have this kind of power, it must be the devil. That's the reality. And so that kind of stuff was very interesting to me, in creating this piece.
Was it interesting to think about sort of current political climates or discussions in regards to feminine power or feminine issues that are mostly decided by men, when you think about this time, which is the witches are mostly decided by men who are in fear, as you said, of subconscious feminine power that they don't understand? I mean, mostly the witch, a lot of times for the Puritans, is kind of like, oh, your feminine power, it pulls me away, I'm drawn to it, it must be a fairy tale power or magic of some kind.
Right. Yeah, I mean, again, just all that kind of specificity that you said is, again, just you remember, is unconscious in Puritan culture. I wasn't trying to intend anything. I was just trying to say this is how a family of extreme English Calvinists who are settling New England might have believed a witching to be. That's kind of what I was trying to do, and that was it. But certain themes just pop out, and this feminist theme is big. And of course, we're dealing with the shadows of all of this today. I've had a lot of reactions from modern witches and Wiccans who are upset about another thing about an evil witch. But even if the evil witch only exists in the minds of the ignorant, she was such a powerful figure in the minds of mass Western culture in this period that the reverberations are all through history, and we're still mopping it up today. I mean, claiming feminine power today as a cultural whole is not really happening yet. I mean, I'm really glad that Daisy Ridley is the new Christ of one of the world's most popular contemporary religions. I think it's important.
I don't think anyone, no matter sort of how fearful of feminine power, are going to watch The Witch and go, "See, I told you they're witches. They are." I think we have some time for audience questions. Anyone have any questions out here in the audience?
Hi, I wanted to know, what is your favorite witch book or movie besides the project that you're working on?
I don't know, man.
I
Hex.
have a feeling it's going to be some esoteric, like actual classic text about witches.
No, I don't know. I mean, yeah, there probably is one, but I mean, Hexen, the silent film, is good. Watch it. It's on YouTube. Check it out.
I'll be much more populist, and just the effect of the Wicked Witch of the West in the Wizard of Oz will always stay with me. So, no particular intellectual, I'm sorry, but yeah.
Next question.
I was wondering, since the movie's so tense, like you guys were describing, and since you lived in that while you were filming, did you guys sort of like to stay in that for your roles and just for the production, or did you find ways to get out and have fun?
Ralph was always in character, just really,
No, I mean, we didn't do anything method in the sense of staying in character all the time, but just the nature of being in that remote location and living together as a family with the children of the cast. Living together like that meant that we stayed in a certain kind of sort of family vibe, but not in a method way. But it did, I think, the way we all stuck together, it kept that creepiness going, and it kept that bond. I think to break a family apart and for it to mean something to the audience, you've got to build a family, to break apart. And so, yeah, sticking together as we did was very helpful.
there was a lot of love, a lot of laughter, a lot of beers.
There wasn't a lot of beers because I had to lose a lot of weight, so I wasn't allowed to drink beer. But the rest of what he's saying is true. Yeah.
Next question.
Hey guys, I'm a huge horror movie fan, and when you see movies like Suspiria or Alice Sweet Alice or Don't Look Now, besides trying to scare you, there's an overwhelming sense of substance in the film, and The Witch sounds like it has a lot of substance. When you were in the creative process of making it, were you trying to make a movie about witches first, or a movie about some of these underlying things first?
That's a good question. I was trying to make a movie about witches first. In fact, I was kind of worried that this was the early drafts were sort of like a master's thesis on witchery, but because originally there was no central protagonist. It was the witch and how she manifested herself to the different members of the family, and that's still there. But with working with my creative producers, Jodie Redman, Jay Van Hoy, and Lars Knudsen, Thomason emerged as the central character and brought the emotional thrust that the story needed.
Mm-hmm. So you go ahead.
I mean, from our point of view, as the cast, we weren't really making a horror movie. Yeah. That's the thing. From our point of view, it wasn't really a horror movie. It was a family drama that Robert made a horror movie out of, in a sense.
I mean, there's elements of horror as it's building, and it definitely builds to a climax that is sort of within like a horror movie classic. But I mean, as it builds, you are watching for the most part a family be torn apart by their disbelief of each other, and it's really heartbreaking at times as well as it is really tense.
Well, I mean, if you're actually invested in the story, the horror can be better. I mean, some people are like, this is not a horror film. This is a psychological suspense thriller with supernatural elements, and I'm like, okay, I don't care. Like, whatever you want to call it, man. Like, then,
very specific genre.
But it's like okay, well then Edgar Allan Poe's not horror. I mean, and maybe that doesn't matter, but but that's more interesting to me. I mean, I'm not even a big Lovecraft fan, but but Lovecraft is looking to find the horror in the sublime. You're not like laughing and giggling and eating popcorn when you read Lovecraft, but
I guess it's just such a rarity that we get a great movie along with what would be called a horror. So often people, and I watch a lot of horror movies, bad and good. I enjoy both of them. But when it comes to a horror movie that is suddenly great filmmaking as well, my brain kind of shuts off the idea of horror, and I'm like, no, this is a great thriller, or this is a great this, because most of the horror movies that we're used to at this point are slasher movies or some sort of bad jump out scare kind of thing.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think that a rose by any other name, right? So who cares? But I think that horror is important. Like the whole idea of looking at what's actually dark in humanity is an important thing. the reason why the witch gets these Puritans is because they're trying to like turn away and not all that stuff and bottle it all up. And the more you bottle all that kind of stuff up, the more it explodes all over your face. So you got to actually like explore this stuff. And you know, these kind of teenage masochistic like titillation things, you know, like they're not looking at darkness. They're shining a quick flashlight on it and running away giggling. And I just don't care.
Did you guys have anything on set? I mean, you're in the middle of the woods, you're shooting this movie about a witch. Did you have any moments on set that were kind of creepy? It's a silly question, but I could imagine if you're really into the mode of the film that you're kind of like, oh, I'm feeling a little off right now.
I mean, the design, the level of research that Robert went to for the design of the sets, the costumes, and everything, it was very, very immersive. So as an actor, you really did feel very much in that world a lot of the time. So yeah, quite a lot of creepy moments, but most of my creepy moments were to do with Black Phillip, the goat in the film, who I had a very, very dodgy relationship with. And so Rhodes said he had two modes, which were sleeping and attacking me. So, and I had to lose 30 pounds for the film, so the goat weighed quite a lot more than me at the time. I was at my skinniest and weakest, and I had to fight him kind of every other day, to be honest, and he always won. Yeah. He put me in the ER 3 times during filming.
Really?
Yeah, he did.
He's referring to the goat in the film. He fights a goat in the film.
Quite a lot, yeah. Yeah, and he managed to detach a tendon from my rib at one point, and yeah, he was pretty hardcore. Yeah.
Wow. I think we have time for one more question. That is crazy.
Hey, I found it interesting that you mentioned the feelings of modern-day Wiccans. Was that a perspective that you were aware of while making the film, or was that a conversation that came afterwards?
It was a perspective that I was aware of. Like, I'm very interested in, you know, religion, mythology, fairy tales, folktales, the occult, and you know, and all of the different facets of that. It's stuff that I'm very passionate about. One of the, you know, one of the historians that was working closely with us, you know, wrote a book, a very, very academic book on white witchcraft that a lot of people find to be the most, like, one of the best books on practicing it practically. So yeah, I was not expecting everyone to like be like very upset with me about it, but I was aware because I was aware of the perspective. Yeah.
Well, you end up, I mean, there's so few witch movies a year, a decade, that eventually, like, you're going to sort of, whether you mean to or not, end up becoming representative of a subculture just by doing that one story, whether you want to or not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I have to let you guys go, but The Witch comes out February 19th. It's incredibly creepy. It's a great, great movie. Congratulations. Thank you so much for coming here and talking to me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.